At 29, Daniel had a problem he didn't understand. He was intelligent. He worked hard. He was good at his job. And he genuinely believed he was a good person. But somehow, people didn't like being around him. His colleagues avoided difficult conversations with him. His friends stopped calling him first. And at work, every time Daniel tried to prove he was right, he somehow ended up losing. Then one evening, after another argument with his manager, Daniel went home, dropped his keys on the table, and asked himself, "Why does everyone seem to be against me?" He didn't know it yet, but the answer wasn't that the world was against him. The problem was the way he was dealing with people. That night, Daniel picked up an old book. The title was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. He expected a few communication tricks. What he found instead would completely change the way he saw human beings. And the strangest part? The first lesson wasn't about becoming more confident. It was about something Daniel thought was impossible to give up: being right. Before we follow Daniel's transformation, if you enjoy stories that teach practical lessons you can actually use in real life, subscribe to the channel, hit like, and tell me in the comments, have you ever lost an argument even though you were completely right? Because Daniel had, and he was about to discover why. Chapter 1. The Argument He Couldn't Win. Daniel's biggest problem was simple. He corrected people. Constantly. If a colleague made a mistake, Daniel pointed it out. If someone suggested a bad idea, Daniel explained why it was bad. If someone disagreed with him, he immediately started building his case. Facts, logic, evidence. He had everything. Except people's cooperation. One Monday morning, a colleague named Ahmed made an error in a report. Daniel looked at the numbers and said, "You calculated this completely wrong." Ahmed looked embarrassed. "I think the data I received was..." Daniel interrupted. "No, look at this. It's obvious." Daniel was right. But something strange happened. Ahmed stopped talking. And for the rest of the day, he avoided Daniel. That night, Daniel read Carnegie's warning. Don't criticize, condemn, or complain. Daniel realized something painful. He had been treating every conversation like a courtroom. Someone had to be the winner, and he always wanted that person to be him. But here's where the story gets interesting. What would happen if Daniel stopped trying to win arguments? That was his first experiment. The very next day, another colleague made a mistake. Daniel opened his mouth, paused, and instead of saying, "You did this wrong," he asked, "Can we look at this together? I think there might be something we should check." The colleague looked at the screen. "Oh, you're right." No argument, no embarrassment, no defensive reaction. Just cooperation. Daniel had discovered his first principle. You can be right and still be wrong about how to communicate. But Carnegie's next lesson was even more surprising, because Daniel was about to discover that avoiding criticism wasn't enough. He needed to replace it with something much more powerful. Chapter 2. The Thing People Secretly Crave. A few days later, Daniel noticed something. His manager rarely praised anyone. Neither did Daniel. When someone did their job well, everyone simply moved on. Work was work. But Carnegie introduced Daniel to a powerful idea. Every human being has a deep desire to feel important. Not necessarily famous, not rich, not powerful. Important. Daniel decided to test it. His colleague Ahmed stayed late one evening to finish a difficult report. Daniel could have said nothing.
Instead, he walked over. "Ahmed, I noticed you stayed late to finish this. I appreciate that. It made tomorrow much easier for the whole team." Ahmed smiled. "Thanks, man." That was it. One sentence. But the next morning, something changed. Ahmed came to Daniel before anyone else and said, "I checked those figures again. Want me to help you with your section?" Daniel stared at him. He hadn't asked. He hadn't demanded. He hadn't offered anything. He had simply noticed someone's effort. And this revealed something Daniel had never understood. People often remember how you made them feel, longer than they remember what you said.
But now Daniel faced another problem. He had learned how to appreciate people. But what if he wanted people to actually open up to him? For that, he would need to learn a completely different skill. Chapter 3: The Conversation That Changed His Friendship. Daniel had a friend named Hamza. They had known each other for years, but recently their conversations had become strange. Hamza would talk, Daniel would wait, and the moment Hamza stopped speaking, Daniel would start talking about himself, his new project, his problems, his opinions, his plans. One evening, Daniel remembered Carnegie's advice: become genuinely interested in other people. So he tried something unusual. He asked Hamza, "How are things actually going with you?" Hamza said, "Fine." Normally, Daniel would have accepted the answer. This time he asked, "No, seriously, how are you?" There was silence. Then Hamza started talking about pressure at home, about financial worries, about feeling lost in his career. Daniel didn't interrupt. For almost 20 minutes, he simply listened. When Hamza finished, he said, "I didn't know you were carrying all that." Hamza looked at him. "Honestly, I didn't think you'd want to hear it." That sentence hit Daniel hard, because Daniel suddenly realized people weren't avoiding him because they hated him. Sometimes they simply didn't feel heard by him. And there's an interesting psychological fact behind this. Research has repeatedly shown that people tend to respond positively when they feel understood and listened to. Conversation isn't merely about transferring information. It also... Chapter 4: A Word That Sounded Too Simple. The next lesson was about names. Carnegie argued that a person's name is deeply important to them. Daniel thought, that's it? Remember names? But he decided to try. At work, there was a new employee. Her name was Sarah. Daniel met her once. Normally, he'd forget the name within minutes. This time, he repeated it naturally. "Nice meeting you, Sarah." A few days later, "Sarah, how's the new project going?" Then something unexpected happened. Sarah smiled. "You actually remembered my name." Daniel laughed. Of course. But later he realized he didn't just remember her name. He remembered her. And that was the real lesson. People don't want to feel like strangers in a crowd. They want to feel recognized. This tiny habit began changing Daniel's relationships. But then came the lesson that would test him more than anything else. Because remembering someone's name is... But then came the lesson that would test him more than anything else. Because remembering someone's name is easy. Changing your behavior when you disagree with them is much harder. Chapter 6: The Day Daniel Made a Mistake. 3 months into his experiment, Daniel made a serious mistake. He sent the wrong figures to his manager. The error delayed a project. His first instinct? Find someone else to blame. "The information I received was incomplete." He almost said it. Then he remembered Carnegie.
And instead, he walked into his manager's office. "I made a mistake. I should have checked the figures before sending them. I'm sorry. I'll correct it today."
His manager looked surprised, then said, "I appreciate you taking responsibility. No shouting, no humiliation, no excuses." Daniel walked out of the room thinking, why had I spent so many years protecting myself from admitting I was wrong? He had believed admitting a mistake made you weaker. Instead, it had made him more trustworthy. But his biggest transformation was still ahead, because Daniel was about to discover that leadership isn't about making people afraid of you. It's about making people want to work with you.
Chapter 7. The Project That Could Have Destroyed Him. 6 months later, Daniel was given responsibility for an important project. The team was struggling. Deadlines were approaching. One employee made a major error. Old Daniel would have exploded. How could you make this mistake? But the new Daniel stopped. He said, "Okay, let's understand what happened first." They investigated. They found the real problem. It wasn't laziness. It was a misunderstanding in the process. Daniel changed the procedure. The same mistake never happened again. And something incredible happened. The team began bringing problems to Daniel before they became disasters. Why? Because they weren't afraid of being humiliated. Daniel had learned one of Carnegie's most important leadership principles. If you need to correct someone, correct the problem without destroying the person's dignity. Attack the mistake, not the person. And this changed Daniel's reputation. People started saying, "Talk to Daniel." Chapter 8. The Real Secret of Influence. 1 year earlier, Daniel had walked into rooms trying to prove himself. Now, he walked into rooms trying to understand others. And strangely, people started listening to him more. His manager trusted him, his colleagues approached him, his friendships became stronger. His relationship with his father improved. But Daniel hadn't become more powerful. He had become more interested in people. And that was the paradox Carnegie had been teaching all along. If you constantly ask, "How can I make," you become desperate for approval. But if you ask, "How can I make this person feel heard, respected, and valued?" something changes. People feel safe around you, and trust begins to grow. That's real influence, not manipulation, not tricks, not pretending, connection. One evening, Daniel opened Carnegie's book again. The pages were full of notes, underlined sentences, little reminders. But now he saw the book differently. The book hadn't taught him how to control people. It had taught him how to stop treating people like obstacles. He learned, don't criticize unnecessarily. Give sincere appreciation. Become genuinely interested in people. Listen. Remember names. Don't turn every disagreement into a battle. Admit when you're wrong. Correct people without humiliating them. And most importantly, make people feel important. Daniel's life didn't transform because everyone around him changed. It transformed because he changed first. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable lesson of all. We often say, people don't understand me. People don't respect me. Nobody listens to me. But perhaps the better question is, have I learned to understand, respect? Tomorrow, choose one person. Don't interrupt them. Don't correct them. Don't tell them about yourself. Ask them one genuine question and listen to the answer. Then, notice what happens. And I want you to tell me in the comments, what is harder for you? Listening without interrupting? Giving genuine appreciation? or admitting when you're wrong. Maybe your answer will reveal the exact lesson you need next. Because sometimes, changing your life doesn't begin with changing your circumstances. It begins with changing the way you treat the person standing in front of you.